Have you ever looked at someone you love and thought, this is the one who'll carry my legacy? The one who'll make me proud? I did. And for years, I believed that everything I taught him, every value, every sacrifice, would guide him through life. But pride has a strange way of twisting love into something unrecognizable. And when that happened, everything changed. It began simply, innocently even. He was my only son, my pride, my hope, the heartbeat of every plan I made for the future. When he was small, his laughter filled the house like sunlight through dusty windows. He would follow me everywhere, tiny footsteps echoing mine, always asking questions, always curious. Back then, he used to say, "Dad, when I grow up, I'll be just like you." And I believed him. I wasn't born into wealth. Everything I owned, every bit of success, was carved out through long nights and sore hands. I worked when others slept, saved when others spent, dreamed when others doubted. So when my son came along, I promised myself that he would never have to struggle the way I did. He would start where I finished. I gave him the best education money could buy. I made sure he had the finest clothes, the newest books, the newest gadgets, all the things I never had. I told myself it was love, that this was how a father showed devotion. But maybe deep down, I was building him a world too perfect, one where effort was optional and gratitude became an afterthought. He grew up bright and talented, sharp as a blade. Teachers praised him, neighbors admired him, and I watched with pride as he took his first steps into adulthood. He spoke with confidence, carried himself with charm, and had that fire in his eyes, the same fire I once had when I was young and hungry for success, but somewhere along the way, and that fire turned into something else. At first, I couldn't put my finger on it. It started with small remarks, a dismissive tone, a joke at my expense, a comment that felt too sharp to be harmless. I brushed it off. He's just growing up, I told myself. He's finding his independence, but independence soon turned into arrogance. He stopped asking for advice. He stopped listening when I spoke. And when he did listen, it was with that look, the one that said, "You're from another time, Dad, you wouldn't understand." I tried to ignore it. I told myself all fathers and sons go through this stage. But late at night, when the house was silent, I couldn't shake the feeling that something precious between us was slipping away. There was a time when he used to help me at the shop. I still remember his small hands sorting papers, his voice calling out, "Dad, one day this business will be huge. You'll see." He believed in me then. But now, as a grown man, he believed only in himself. He began spending more time outside, business meetings, parties, new opportunities. Every conversation between us became an argument. He thought I was too cautious, too old-fashioned. I thought he was too reckless, too proud. And little by little, the warmth between us turned cold. One evening, I waited for him at dinner. The food went cold on the table. When he finally came home, I asked softly, "Where were you?" He didn't even look guilty. He just said, "Out with people who understand success." That night, after he went to his room, I sat alone and stared at the empty chair across from me. I realized I was losing my son, not to bad company, not to greed, but to pride. Still, I didn't give up. I told myself that patience was my greatest weapon. I would keep guiding him, even if he pretended not to listen. I would keep loving him, even if he didn't show it back. Because that's what fathers do. They love silently, stubbornly, even when it hurts. As he grew older, his achievements started piling up. He got promotions, recognition, and friends who fed his ego. He began to believe he was unstoppable. And maybe that's when he started seeing me as the one obstacle in his way. He began criticizing the way I ran the business. He said things like, "You're stuck in the past, Dad, or if you just let me handle it, I could double our profits." I tried explaining to him that running a business wasn't just about numbers. It was about people, trust, loyalty, but he didn't care. He was blinded by ambition. The respect in his voice slowly disappeared. The same boy who once ran to me with every little problem now rolled his eyes at my advice. I began to feel like a stranger in my own home. Then came the day that changed everything. It was a crisp morning in late December. The air smelled like rain. He walked into the room wearing a perfectly pressed suit and that confident smile that used to make me proud, but now made my heart ache. "Dad," he said, "it's time I take over the business. You've done enough. It's my turn now." His tone wasn't asking, it was declaring. For a moment I just stared at him. My hands trembled slightly, but I hid it. Inside me something cracked. Did he think this empire built itself? Did he forget the nights I stayed awake, the risks I took, the things I lost, to make sure he'd never have to go through what I did? "Take over?" I repeated softly. "Yes," he said confidently. "You've worked hard, I'll give you that. But times have changed. You're old school, Dad. I can make this bigger than you ever imagined." I looked into his eyes, the same eyes I once saw, filled with curiosity and warmth, and now they reflected nothing but pride. It felt like the ground had slipped from beneath me. I wanted to shout. I wanted to remind him who had given him everything. But instead I stayed quiet, because somewhere deep down I realized that yelling wouldn't fix what was broken. His pride had already built walls words couldn't reach. That night, I sat alone in my study. The old ledgers opened before me, the smell of ink and dust filling the air. My heart was heavy. This business wasn't just numbers. It was my life story, written in sweat and patience. And now, that story was being rewritten by someone who didn't yet understand its value. Outside, the rain started to fall, tapping softly against the window. And for the first time, I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not bitterness, but resolve. If pride was what he wanted, I would let him have it. If experience was what he ignored, I would let him learn it the hard way. Because sometimes, the greatest lesson a father can give is silence. Sometimes you have to let the ones you love fall, just so they can learn how to stand again. And so began the story of my patience and his pride. The days following his declaration passed in a blur. My son took the reins of the business without hesitation, believing that his time had come. I watched as he made decisions that would have been considered reckless just a few months ago. He wasn't ready. He didn't have the experience, the patience, the wisdom that I had gained over the years. Yet with each passing day, he seemed more certain, more arrogant, as if he could fix everything with the same boundless ambition that had driven him to this point. But ambition alone wasn't enough. I remember the first time he decided to fire one of our long-time employees, a man who had worked with me for years. The man had always been loyal, always dependable. But my son, in his new position of power, had already made up his mind. He saw no room for sentimentality, no need for loyalty, only results. I tried to intervene. "Son, you can't just let go of people who have been here through thick and thin. You have to value trust, respect, and loyalty," I said, trying to reason with him, but he didn't listen. "We need change, Dad. This place needs to move forward, and I can't do that if we keep holding on to the past." I couldn't believe it. In a single decision, he dismissed everything I had worked for, the relationships, the history, the heart of the business. And just like that, a piece of me cracked deep inside. The more he took control, the more distant he became. It wasn't just the business decisions. It was how he treated me, like I was some relic from a bygone era, no longer relevant, no longer important. I'd spent years building this life for him, teaching him the value of hard work, the importance of relationships, the meaning of sacrifice. But now, he was erasing it all with the swipe of a hand, ignoring every lesson I had spent so much time imparting. The betrayal came not just in his actions, but in his words. He began to question me at every turn, second-guessing everything I said. He started calling the shots without even consulting me. Decisions that would have taken weeks to deliberate were now rushed, half-baked, and careless. It was his words that stung the most, though. It was as if he had no memory of all the years I had spent teaching him, nurturing him. He told me that I was holding him back, that he didn't need my approval anymore. "You've had your time, Dad, now it's mine. I know what's best." Each time he spoke like this, it felt like a slap in the face, like everything I had done had meant nothing. I'd given him everything, my time, my love, my sacrifices, and now I was nothing more than an obstacle to his success. He no longer saw me as a mentor or a father. To him, I was just someone who couldn't keep up, someone who was out of touch. And the worst part? He didn't even notice how much it hurt. The arrogance in his voice was so palpable, so undeniable. He truly believed that he could build everything on his own, without understanding the foundation that had been laid for him. He didn't see that ambition alone wasn't enough. It took patience, humility, and respect to truly build something lasting. There was a day when I stood in the corner of the office, watching him dictate decisions that made my stomach churn. He had bypassed me again, cutting corners, ignoring the advice of people who had worked with me for years. It was the beginning of the end, but I couldn't stop it. I felt helpless, watching him make mistakes I knew would cost him everything. But the final blow came when I learned about the deal with our biggest competitor. He had gone behind my back, signed a contract that would hurt our long-term prospects. And worse, he did it without even consulting me, without even telling me. The betrayal wasn't just in his actions. It was in his disregard for everything I had built, for everything I had sacrificed. He had chosen to destroy what I had worked for, and there was no going back. I spent days, even weeks, mulling over my next steps. I wasn't someone who believed in revenge. But what he had done, what he had taken from me, felt personal. It wasn't just a business decision. It was an attack on everything I had given him, everything I had built. At first, I thought about confronting him, about laying it all out on the table. But I knew that wouldn't work. His pride was too great, his walls too high. If I confronted him directly, it would only drive him further away. He wouldn't hear me. He wouldn't see the truth. I realized that the best revenge wasn't in destroying him. It was in letting him destroy himself. He needed to learn the consequences of his actions, the price of his arrogance. I would pull back. I would stop offering advice, stop intervening in his decisions. If he thought he knew better, then let him prove it. Let him make the mistakes he was so sure he could avoid. I wasn't going to make it easy for him to fail, but I wasn't going to stop him either. Sometimes the best way to teach someone a lesson is to let them fall, just so they can learn how to stand up again. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I wasn't bitter, but I was determined. I would let him make his own decisions, and I would watch as the weight of his pride crushed him. I knew he would come to me for help when things fell apart, but by then it would be too late. He would have to face the consequences of his arrogance, and maybe, just maybe, he would understand what he had lost. It wasn't about hurting him. It was about showing him the truth. And the truth was simple. No one can succeed alone. We need each other. We need humility. And when pride takes over, it blinds us to the very things that make success meaningful. So, I waited. I watched, and I let him go. Months passed, and I stood on the sidelines watching my son unravel the very empire I had built with my own hands. He made one mistake after another. His decisions, once full of confidence, became increasingly reckless. He alienated key employees, ignored the advice of seasoned professionals, and began making deals that only served his short-term ambition, not the long-term health of the company. I could see it now. He was sinking. And no matter how much I wanted to intervene, I knew it was time for him to face the consequences of his actions. The company I had poured my heart into was now crumbling. It was a slow death, like watching a slow-motion disaster unfold. Each day, the financial reports became worse, and the once thriving business began to suffocate under the weight of bad decisions. His pride had blinded him to everything that mattered, the people, the values, the sacrifices. But still, he refused to ask for help. He was too proud to admit he was wrong, too stubborn to turn to anyone for advice. Every time I tried to reach out, he pushed me further away. The gap between us had never been wider. Then one day, it all came crashing down. I remember it clearly. It was late afternoon. The office was quiet, and the storm clouds outside reflected the storm brewing inside him. My son walked into the room, his face pale, his eyes wide with panic. The confidence he once carried like armor was now gone, replaced by an overwhelming sense of fear. "Dad," he started, his voice shaky, "I've messed up. I don't know what to do. The company, it's failing. We're going under." In that moment, everything hit me. The years of struggle, the broken trust, the countless hours of hard work, it all led to this. He had finally reached the point where he couldn't save it on his own. I didn't say anything at first. I just looked at him. He stood there, his shoulders slumped, his eyes filled with regret, and for the first time in months, I saw the boy who had once looked up to me with admiration. The arrogance, the pride, gone. In its place, there was fear, vulnerability, and something else, realization. "I need your help," he whispered, barely able to meet my gaze. The irony was heavy in the room. Here he was, the same son who had pushed me aside, the same one who had thought he could do it all alone, now asking for my help. I could have relished the moment. I could have told him, "I told you so," but that wouldn't have done either of us any good. I saw the tears in his eyes, the realization that everything he had built with pride had come crashing down. And I understood. This wasn't just about business. It was about him coming to terms with the fact that he needed to humble himself, that pride had cost him everything. I took a deep breath and walked toward him. I didn't yell. I didn't scold. I just placed my hand on his shoulder and said, "We'll fix this, but you have to learn to listen. You have to understand that no one succeeds alone, not even you." Together, we worked through the mess he had created. I didn't do it for him. I did it with him. He was finally ready to listen, ready to learn. It wasn't easy. There were long nights, countless meetings, and difficult decisions to be made. But little by little, we started picking up the pieces. I didn't feel victorious. Not really. Helping him felt like the right thing to do, but there was no satisfaction in seeing him struggle. The damage had been done, and it was going to take time to rebuild not just the company, but the trust between us. We couldn't undo the mistakes, but we could learn from them, and that's what we did. Slowly, he began to change. The arrogant, prideful young man I had known was starting to understand the true value of humility. He began to appreciate the people who had been by my side all these years, the employees who had been loyal, the clients who had trusted us, and as we worked together to rebuild the company, I began to see a new version of my son, a version who no longer saw me as an obstacle, but as a guide, as someone whose experience could help him succeed. We started working as a team again, but this time it wasn't about control or pride. It was about partnership, about rebuilding what had been broken, about restoring the trust that had been lost. In the end, I realized that revenge wasn't the answer. I didn't need to tear him down to make him understand. The best revenge, I discovered, was giving him the opportunity to rise above his pride and make things right. Sometimes, the greatest lesson we can teach others and ourselves is that pride can blind us to what truly matters. It can make us feel invincible, but it can also make us blind to the consequences of our actions. The road to success isn't paved with arrogance. It's paved with humility, patience, and the willingness to learn from others. Revenge isn't always about confrontation. Sometimes it's about letting someone fall, letting them face the consequences of their pride so they can learn to rise again. The real victory lies not in destroying someone, but in helping them rebuild. And as for me, I learned that sometimes the hardest thing to do is to let go. But when you do, when you give someone the space to grow, that's when you truly make a difference. In the end, our bond was stronger. Our business too slowly began to thrive again. But more than that, my son had learned the greatest lesson of all. Success doesn't come from pride. It comes from hard work, humility, and understanding that you can't do it all on your own. The real victory wasn't in the business, it was in the wisdom gained, the lessons learned, and the peace that comes from letting go of the past. And in that peace we found each other again.